Hi everyone, Sam Silverman, Managing Partner of EB-5 here with my partner Mike Schoenfeld.
So one of the topics that's always a little bit harder to talk about is what happens when projects go wrong. Not just EB-5 projects, but real estate projects in general. So Sam, do you want to run through some of the different types of situations where we've seen projects go wrong? And then we can talk a little bit about what we do to minimize those chances and like what we do if we do have to work something out.
So there's different types of failures that can happen in EB-5 projects. So one common one that we see, and we saw a lot during COVID recently, was just failure to execute, right? So project was going to build a hotel. They had a budget. It was going to cost $20 million. They only found 3 of the 10 investors they were looking for, and then those investors put their money in. Money was spent. And then COVID happened, they weren't able to locate the other investors, then prices went up like crazy, and then now they go to build the project, and instead of 20 million, now it's 28 million, and they can't line up the other financing because the project is now that much more expensive. The numbers don't work, they can't get a loan, and the project basically just never happens, right? And unfortunately, in a situation like that, it's most likely that those 3 investors, their money was probably spent on land or soft costs, things that don't really create a lot of jobs. And so unfortunately, in that situation, it's unlikely the investor is going to successfully complete the EB-5 process because there wasn't enough spend on hard and soft construction costs, which generate jobs. And because the project failed, it never got built, maybe it'll be sold and investors will get a tiny fraction of their original investment capital back. Right? So that's kind of one type of failure, just failure to get off the ground, right? Another failure is, okay, project got built, but it didn't perform as well as was hoped, right? So same example, built the hotel for $20 million. There was a senior loan, let's say there was a mezzanine loan, and then there was EB-5, kind of in third position. Well, the hotel got built, and unfortunately, it didn't perform as well as expected. We thought we could rent the rooms for $200 a night. Guess what? They only rented for $120. And because of that, the hotel is not able to cover all of the debt service payments for the senior and the mezzanine loan, which are ahead of the EB-5 investment. And so in that situation, there was a default on the loan. The senior lender foreclosed on the property, and the senior lender basically wiped the EB-5 investors. They took possession of the property. They sold it, they recovered most of their loan, the mezzanine loan got a little bit of their money back, but the EB-5 investors were third and they didn't recover any of their capital. Now in that situation, the hotel did get built, and if there was enough job creation from just building the hotel, then those investors will successfully complete the immigration process and get the green card, but they're just not going to get any of their original principal investment back. And in that situation, Mike, how do we as a company, how do we avoid those 2 types? Those are probably the 2 most common types of project failures that we've seen over the last 10 years. How does our diligence framework work to try to make sure that doesn't happen to one of our real estate projects?
Exactly. So as we're looking through projects, really what we're analyzing is looking for comparables, understanding the cost structure of the project and what the exit looks like. So in general, when you're thinking of, let's say, a hotel project, there should be comparables. And we're also focused on geographies where we believe in the macro trends. So many of our prior deals have been with a group called the Coulter Group that focuses on the southeast of the United States. So part of the way that we work through the diligence process is by finding areas that are growing with economic drivers where we see a long-term potential for success, and conservatively underwriting those deals where the EB-5 is either in the senior portion of the capital stack, if it's mezzanine, that it's provided with a repayment guarantee and additional security on top of the project, and really doing whatever we can to minimize any issues. In the event that one of the projects was built and not able to sell for as much as expected, that's why we have that repayment guarantee, so we could go in and work on getting the capital back for our investors. So one thing that I think we should also discuss is what happens when there's that black swan event. So COVID. There were many EB-5 projects underway in COVID. Some of them were able to complete successfully, others were not. They either didn't have the capital, they didn't have the right financial resources behind it. So one of the things that's most important to us is having strong financial sponsors of the deal. So during COVID, we have EB-5 investors in multiple hotels, which obviously were not going to be very successful when the travel industry is essentially shut down. But with a strong capital partner, we were able to work to have them inject additional equity to stabilize the hotels, make it through that unique event, make it through to the other side. And then when you're there, everything is back to stable. So it's important to have good development partners that understand how to operate the assets and also have the financial capabilities. So if there are some bumps in the road, it isn't catastrophic to the EB-5 investors.
Exactly. And that kind of is that comparison across different projects is pretty obvious in a situation like COVID, right? If you choose to invest in an EB-5 project that's being built by a developer, maybe they've done 1 or 2 hotels, and then a major economic crisis event like COVID happens, maybe they don't have the necessary capital to keep the project going, to pay the bills, make sure it continues to operate successfully. Thankfully, the hotels that we invested in, we'd done our homework on the developer, a huge company, Coulter, that's done hundreds of projects over the last 30 years, and they have significant cash available to invest in a project that's struggling and make sure it gets completed. And that's what happened during COVID. And so, we saw a lot of projects operated by, very small developers, that promised investors greater returns, better terms, et cetera. But then COVID happened and a lot of those investors lost all their money and they're not going to get their green cards. Mm-hmm. Our projects, they don't offer that type of level of risk because we've picked a responsible sponsor who's done that same project many, many times and has extra capital to make sure that things go smoothly. So that's really, really critical when picking a project, is to make sure the developer, the person building the project, they have additional resources beyond just what's going into the project at the beginning to make sure that things get completed successfully and that if there are any speed bumps along the way, that things get addressed and handled appropriately.